Welcome back. Do you hear about this thing called personal branding? Well, the breaking up to the minute news is that personal branding is no longer just a want to have. It is 100% essential for you to be a visible leader so you can grow your business and affect positive social impact. And there's good news right now, too, because we have an expert on this whole personal branding idea. It's Natasha Walstra, who is here to help you own your voice. She helps entrepreneurs and sales professionals increase revenue through LinkedIn personal branding and social selling strategy. She's a podcast host, and her website is nearpointstrategies.com. So we're going to crack this egg wide open. We will figure out what we need to do to ride the coattails of what these influencers have figured out and finally stop working so dang hard and work smarter as far as growing your business and attracting clients and all those other amazing things. And Natasha will help us. So Natasha, wonderful speaking with you.
Likewise, Robert. Thanks. That was an amazing intro.
Thanks. I do my best. And we have to do this, right? We have to figure out, well, if I'm just going to hide behind a computer or hide behind a screen, maybe that worked decades ago. But nowadays, especially post pandemic, we're all on camera with social media. We have to be out there if we want to stand out and rise above all that fierce competition out there. So tell me about what you are doing to rise up. Tell me about what makes you stand out, what makes you so passionate.
Sure. Gosh, where to begin? So I've been on this mission since I left the book publishing world, actually, to better serve the leaders I was working with and signing with at Forbes Books, which is where I was, because I realized, 5 years ago, a book was enough to differentiate you. But now, if you don't have an audience or community you're engaging with, no one would ever know about it. So since I left there, I've been like trying to figure out what is that formula to help leaders own their voice and show up in a way that feels comfortable to them, but then also has the ROI to it, right? And so my background in sales over the last 10 years is what kind of happened of like a convergence of personal branding and sales. And here I am helping leaders, executives, and sales professionals figure out how to do that specifically on LinkedIn.
Wonderful. And it's amazing how it just things get more like fractionalized and smaller and more competition. You think about how in the good old days, probably before either you or I were born, there was just three TV channels, and then they added like cable TV and internet, and then newspapers are got crowded out by all the social media. So it just seems like the competition is more and more. And it used to be that it seemed like a handful of big companies had all the attention, had all the traffic, and then it gets more and more like all these pieces get shaved off of there, which seems good maybe because it's more distributed. And then like you're saying, the like it used to be you go to a publisher and they have this whole network, right? Go for a year on a book tour, do all the book signings, get all the publicity. But then it seems like what you hear about now is that a lot of publishers say, well, what's your platform?
Right.
Like how big is your following on all these different social media sites? So what traffic will you bring in? So it's like now it's more on us to to get the attention, to get the people to like follow our brand and to buy from us. And so what's even the starting point with this whole mess with all these, it makes me overwhelmed just thinking about it, right? With all the things that I don't even have time to do. So if someone says, okay, well, I've heard that I need to build my platform and that I need to have this personal branding thing, where do we even begin?
That's a very good question because there's different avenues you can start with, of course, but really, you know, with my background being in sales, the first question I always ask my clients are, what is your goal for the rest of Q1, Q2, or 2024? And then let's pay attention to all the activity we do align with those goals so that you're staying motivated because you're seeing results, right? So I actually, after leaving Forbes Publishing, I worked in a strategy firm where we helped with positioning, mission statements, all the stuff, right? But I realized that once you have that stuff, which most companies do, they know their values, they know what their, call to action is, they have the things for the most part, but they don't know how to take that and then share it and amplify that on their platforms, and not from their business platform, right? But from the personal brand. And so the first step really outside of, understanding what their goals are is taking a look at, Googling your name and what shows up, right? And then updating that initial like lines that are there, and typically your LinkedIn, your social profiles will be on there. So primarily, given that LinkedIn is your professional platform here now, take a look at that, and does it represent who you are, who you serve, how you help them, right? When you want to think about who your ideal client or referral partners are, and if they were to go to your profile, would they be proud to share that with their network, right? And most of the time, people can't say yes to that. And so it's one of those things, like before we do business with anyone, we always look at their LinkedIn, their experience, but we never pay attention to our own. And I think that's typically like that starting point of, setting the foundation, am I representing myself correctly?
I love that. It's a good insight that how important LinkedIn is, especially for us. And I don't know if it was just me, but I know I had a LinkedIn account for a ton of years. And it wasn't until maybe about like 2 or 3 years ago that I started just being on there religiously all day, hours every day, looking at people's profiles, starting conversations, kind of combing through my inbox. And up until then, like I was doing like email marketing, and I felt kind of the FOMO of people were saying, well, it's all about the data and like what's in your CRM, and you should be able to open up a contact and see like what their dog's favorite brand of dog food is or something like that, right? You should have all this data on your people. And I always thought like, well, how do I get that? Do I like survey them? Do we do any kind of internet sleuthing? And then with LinkedIn becoming what it is, it's like, oh, it's all out there, right? When people talk about like the joke of social media, how like Mark Zuckerberg and Facebook has our data because we've voluntarily given it to them, it's like LinkedIn is the upside of that, right? Like
Hmm.
we filled in all this information on LinkedIn, so like you said, if you want to do business with someone, you can see what they're posting about, their websites are, their about page, like their, and it used to be just kind of a resume site, and like LinkedIn has blown up. So but then you're saying, well, that's great for us when we do our sort of research, but we need to be looking at from the outside looking in, and what do people see from us? What's the first impression when we Google our own name, when we look at our LinkedIn profile, what's in that top area, what's in the banner area, like just what kind of first impression would someone see? And so this is a painful process, right? To look at our own stuff and kind of play detective of someone finding us. And so what would you say to someone that says, I do it sometimes, but not often enough. And it's so painful. I can't bring myself to like, to lean into the narcissism required to check on my stuff. Like, what would you say to that if someone says like, I cringe when I look at what's already existing about me?
Yeah. And most people do, right? It's uncomfortable. It's not something you want to be like spending a lot of time on. You feel like it's a vanity ego project. Even just the term personal branding makes people cringe, right? Like it really does. The thing is now, and like I kind of reframe it with my clients, because talking about, have you heard the term near bound yet?
No.
So it's something I heard about 9 months ago or so. It's a relatively new terminology. It's basically, if you think of inbound being marketing and outbound being sales, near bound is leveraging your network, referrals, word of mouth. It's all of your relationships, right? And the future of business is near bound, right? Like it's actually taking it back to how it used to be and getting rid of some of the automation, the robots, the chat GPT, right? And like human to human conversations, right? It's about your relationships. And what I realized, and when I was starting my business, what I help people with and what I've always done in my, sales career is leverage this near bound strategy, not necessarily knowing that that's what the term was, obviously. But the way that I look at it is like the near bound strategy, in order to have one, it starts with you, right? It starts with your expertise. And so instead of looking at this as your personal brand and a vanity ego project, look at it as you're showcasing your expertise in a way that not only do people want to work with you, they're also more inclined to refer you. Right. And so it's really just, it's essential for business survival now, right? Because if you don't exist on LinkedIn, or if it's not updated from years and years ago, it actually does the opposite, right? You lose trust in your prospects, your referral partners, whatever that looks like. And so it's really just something, it's no longer a luxury. It's something that you have to have. So when you
I agree.
reframe it like that
Yeah,
and look at
that's good
it, like
reframing.
take
Yeah.
the personal branding out of it and look at it as like an essential strategy for your business growth, people are much more likely to buy into it.
Yeah, and so it's about our expertise that we're demonstrating instead of just saying all these great things about ourselves. And you're so right. When I look at all these LinkedIn profiles, you end up getting an intuition about it, right? And when you
Hmm.
see like someone's last post was 5 months ago, you think like, are they really a serious business person? And
Hmm.
so, what would you say is to in like sales terms? What's a good like quota, so to speak, or like as far as like beefing up someone's LinkedIn, do you recommend someone spend like an hour a week or an hour a day? or do like 20 different activities? Like if someone says, I'm not doing enough on LinkedIn and I should be doing more, what's a good short-term goal to shoot for?
That's a really good question as well, because the thing is what I'm realizing is a lot of people think that they have to spend hours on there to see results from it, but um, thinking that then holds them back from even starting, right? So if you're doing nothing right now, take baby steps and just spend 10 minutes a day on it. And I'm not saying it's because it's not just about what you post, it's about the quality of conversations you're having behind the scenes and the relationships you're building off the platform, right? And so if you're just sending one new DM to a former colleague of yours, just to catch up, or adding 5 new people that fit your ICP, right? That type of activity, it doesn't take that long. It can really be 10, 20 minutes. And then you build it up, because the thing is, you'll be seeing results from it, right? And so you're going to want to spend more time on it because you're being intentional about the activity. Something I always tell my clients, though, is you want to make sure, you want to be thinking to yourself or asking yourself, am I being productive, or am I just being active while you're spending your time on LinkedIn? Because if you're just being active and scrolling through it, you're not going to get anything from that, right? You can spend hours on it. It's just like any other social platform. And so what you want to do is just be very targeted with the activity. So if you're doing nothing right now, start with 10 minutes a day, right? And if you're doing maybe 30 minutes a day, maybe do an hour, maybe you don't even need to. I mean, the ask that I have typically with my clients is that they're spending at least 30 minutes a day of doing activity towards it. Because again, I recognize that most people are busy running their business, right? Or have other tasks and things that they need to be doing. So this is not going to be their only thing that they're spending time on. Like, I probably spend a couple hours on LinkedIn a day, but I built a business around it, right? So that makes sense for me. But I think, the average leader, 30 minutes a day would be sufficient. But don't let that like scare you from starting.
Right. Just start with something. And you mentioned this idea earlier on about how there's two sides of the coin, right? There is looking good on social media and posting and all that, which is important. But what is even more important is making money, right? It has to lead to something. And so you're saying that by like be intentional, don't just scroll as if it's Facebook or Twitter with no point, make it make sense for your business. And I think about that all the time. Like when I scroll, I'm just like, okay, well, who is my ideal client, right? They talk about that all the time. But then I'm like, okay, well, what's LinkedIn showing me? And then if there's someone who I'm maybe warming up as a lead, or someone that I just been talking to the last 4 months, or like someone that kind of fits the profile of who I want to see more, who wants to notice me, I'm like, okay, I'll interact with that. If I'm in a space and there's like some other podcaster, I'm like, okay, I want to be interacting that because I want LinkedIn to show me more of that. I want that person to pay attention to me. And then if there's any bystanders looking as well, I want someone to notice that. And so that's kind of just my thought process when you talk about, well, put in this 30 minutes a day if you can, but make it relate to your business and your niche. So that way the personal branding is not just about what you post on your profile, which like is what you think about at first, but then like who and what you're interacting with as well. And so to help us kind of drill down on this more, I know that you have this thing called the NEAR framework, right? The network, engage, accelerate, relate. And so is that a good kind of roadmap for what this leads to? Because when people say, okay, like personal branding, like what's the 3 month or 6 month plan? Like what are the maybe longer term goals that are there in the future?
Right. And that's where looking at, like, set aside LinkedIn and your personal brand, and you look at what your KPIs are for your business, for your like BHAG, whatever those goals are, and kind of reverse engineering everything. And so if your goal is more like brand awareness and brand differentiation, you're going to be wanting to be posting consistently. It doesn't necessarily have to be every day, but you want to really position yourself as a thought leader, and then start to engage and connect with other thought leaders or experts in the space so that you become known within the industry, right? And then thinking about who you're trying to target and who they follow, start engaging with those people who maybe have a bigger audience than you have, right? Because you might just be starting, you may only have your current network of 2,000 followers, let's say, but you want to target somebody, that has 100,000 plus, that you can start to engage with their other folks. And so the long-term goal of this really is just understanding what are your business goals, and like, if sales is a big part of it, which typically is like, it all comes down to ROI on things. But in some cases, right, it may not be the sales in traditional sense of like cash in hands. It might be referral partnerships, right? It might be conversations with private equity. It might be you're trying to grow your team and you want to hire the top talent, right? And so all these different end goals will determine what type of activity you should be focusing on, to make sure that you're actually making that happen, right?
I love that. That goals do not necessarily mean like this amount of money. Well, like you want it to relate in some way, but you're saying goals can be to build a better team, to have these referral partners, to maybe sort the leads, so to speak, into the correct buckets. And like I think about these big ideas all the time, right? Where social media tries to put us in a box, and you think, okay, well, how do I ride that wave? And at first, when Facebook first added like resharing, you and I have been around so long. You remember when that used to not even be a thing, to like repost something, and
Mhm.
then when that started happening and like the liking and the commenting, you think of, okay, like what gets me more attention? And you think, okay, well, the superficial sort of viewpoint on that is if I post something and it gets a lot of comments and likes, then that will show more. But then when LinkedIn became a thing, you think about like, oh, there's like the social graph, right? There's like me on this map, and then there's these other people, and I want to kind of be a lookalike to this person and see what they're doing. And so that's kind of interesting to think about, and it's exciting, right? It taps into what you're talking about, where we want to put in a tiny bit of effort and time into this LinkedIn thing and be excited about the results and put in more and more, so that way we continue with it and then it pays off. And so as far as people kind of applying this plan, right, of having activity in LinkedIn and thinking of my team and my referral sources and my clients and my mentors or who want to be like, where do people go wrong with LinkedIn? Like you think, well, there's the trap of not being there enough or being too pushy, too salesy, but just what really makes you mad, grinds your gears about people misusing LinkedIn?
I think the pitch slapping has gotten out of control. Like people just connect and then try and find some sort of connection or something that they customize their first message, let's say, in a way that's just so standard and then pitch slap you right away. And I just think, that actually did work 5 years ago as well, right? Like when people were still not really using LinkedIn as it is today. And I just keep getting it. I mean, it's insane the amount of pitching I get just from the get go without actually starting to have a conversation, right? So I think that's something that people just need to be aware of. The AI messaging has gotten kind of out of control, even for comments. Like I can tell immediately, if it was written by AI or not. That's something that like it, at the end of the day, ChatGPT nor your VA can build relationships for you, right? Only you can do that. And I think that's what's going to separate those who are successful in business are those that actually are building genuine relationships, right? Because we just got so consumed with automation and figuring out the best ways to make it easier for our lives, not thinking about our clients or prospects on the end and how it is for them, right? And we're just sick of that type of inauthenticity, right? Even the term
Right.
authenticity is like lost its meaning because we're talking, you got to be authentic, you got to be authentic, which is, but it's true. Like like it's going to stand out so much those who are actually showing up versus who are hiring someone to do it for you, right?
Right. And it's just like you're saying, like there's the swings over the years, there's the trends where it becomes too much of this and too much of the chat GPT. And you always hear the lesson with AI of how it works best if you work with it, if it's your buddy. If you say, well, if I as a human being have all these tasks that I have to do, and a lot of them are really monotonous, really repetitive, then maybe we hand that over to the AI a little bit. But then there's the possibility of doing it too much, and sometimes it's not immediately obvious because not everyone is like you and me. And you and I have like the AI detectors, right? Because we use it so much, you can tell if a comment says, "Let's delve in to
Yeah.
this testament," and
In this
it's not
realm.
A, but it's B, and there's semicolons, like right, like we
And the
we see all of the
beacon, the
yeah.
rocket ship.
It's a beacon, it's a lighthouse, all those things. Somehow it's just like it speaks really close to how a human would, but like something's kind of weird. And
Hmm.
then when you look at deeper, it's like, did it really say anything? It's kind of just adding to the space. It's sort of being useless. So we want to use it as a helpful tool. And so how do we navigate? Like you say, like we don't want to do the pitch slapping, but then also when people say like build a relationship, you think like that there's the drawback there of that taking a lot of time, and you wonder if you're just like wasting your time. Like it sounds good in theory to like have all these thoughtful conversations to warm people up, but I imagine someone might say, I'm afraid of spending 8 hours a day in my LinkedIn inbox having
Mhm.
30 conversations at once and it not leading anywhere. So what's the answer there? How do we kind of have our cake and eat it too? How do we like build the relationship and like be a problem solver, but also have it lead to making money?
Sure. So, I mean, it is a little bit of a long game, I'd say. And to be honest, too, like conversations don't just start in the DMs, they start in the comment section. So if you want to just start small and find those thought leaders you really, you really connect with, you have similar or very dissimilar ideas and go to, have the conversations in the comments. So like that's a starting point, let's say. And then just being very strategic about who it is that you're having those conversations with. It's not like you have to be having virtual chats with everybody, but if there's some commonality or there's some opportunity or exchange of value that you think could come from this, not having the ulterior motive necessarily of like, oh, it's going to be a sale or it's going to be a referral partner, but there might be opportunity for some sort of exchange of knowledge at least, right? And so if you go into it with that open mind and leading with generosity too, it all comes back on this platform. Like that is what LinkedIn is. It's all about reciprocity and giving. And so it does happen, but I do think there is a beautiful blend between having that organic foundation set, which is really with you, right? And then you can amplify that with paid opportunities, right? Like getting it out there a little further. I think there is a nice blend with that. But if you start doing like paid ads from the start or have this crazy funnel, but you don't have that foundation of you, it's not really going to be impactful, right? And you're just going to waste money on it. And I think that's actually probably why so many companies are jaded by digital marketing firms because they claim they can do all this stuff, but then there's no foundation, right? And so I think that's where you can have your cake and eat it too.
Wonderful. So yeah, you're saying that we need to do multiple things at once. Don't just run. You wouldn't just run paid ads and not have SEO. You wouldn't just send direct mail and be contacting someone in other ways. So likewise, like you're saying think of these connections and these meetings that they might be building towards as opportunities. And that's also a helpful insight there of don't just send your Calendly link, right? Don't just get these calls on the calendar and you have no idea what they're all about. And like I've had some replies of people saying that as well. Like I start these conversations on LinkedIn and someone's like, oh, let's just get on a Zoom. And I'm like, well, hang on a second. Like, am I right for you? Are you right for me? Don't we have kind of a goal for this meeting? So that's a helpful insight as far as just navigating this nuanced communication and this relationship building. And so where does you and your company fit into all this? Like we have this cool conversation. I mean, I myself have all these ideas and I'm sure listeners do too. And so if they say, okay, well, Natasha knows her stuff when it comes to this relationship building, this LinkedIn, this near-bound idea, and I want her to help me in my company. How does someone know if they're a right fit and what is the solution you provide?
Thank you for asking that. I appreciate it. I ultimately created a program that I would have loved to have years ago when I first started doing this because it is hard putting yourself out there, right? And so having somebody that can kind of guide you around best practices, hold you accountable, and then be that thought partner around this all, I would have loved that. And so that's basically what I did. The program itself is around training, accountability, content, and thought partnership. The thought partnership aspect of it is both social selling and business development, but then also that mindset, mental roadblocks, imposter syndrome, things that we all face when you're trying to put yourself out there. And so those that are thinking about this, the ones that, you know, really understand that this isn't a done for you program, it's a done with you. It's like I'm your guide to help you find your voice and then own your voice and then amplify it on LinkedIn. And so if you understand, the power of what expertise and thought leadership can do and how it can differentiate your business, then we're a great fit. It's just you don't necessarily know where to begin, right? And so it's funny because I've been living and breathing LinkedIn for nearly 10 years. Like I first got into LinkedIn when I was an SDR and I had to cold call 100 dials a day, smile and dial type of role. I was absolutely terrible at it, but I'm super competitive and had to find a way to still hit my numbers. And so that's when I discovered LinkedIn, and I've been using it as not a job searching tool, but actually for business development for years. And so all the work that we do is based around getting ROI from that. And so whether that is, actual cash in hands, right? And new clients, or it's referral partnerships, like I mentioned, like those are the things that I work with people on. And so understanding like it's personal branding, but with that sales lens and knowing that it's going to help grow your business, that's when we should work together.
And the done with you for this makes a lot of sense, because if you're trying to do it yourself, you're just like, well, I'm not even sure if I'm doing it right. If it's done for you, well, then you might not like what the person creates for you, or says, well, that's not me. Or, it would be easier if I just tore it all down and made it myself. So done with you sounds like a lot more fun, and a lot more like everybody gets what they want, because you get something that is thought through and demonstrates your expertise. And we always hear about like the EEAT from Google,
Mhm,
right? The experience, expertise, authority, and trustworthiness.
mhm.
So that way we can just like express ourselves the best, and then also be like, okay, well, I am about that, I'm not about that. And so what's the URL, what's the call to action here if someone wants to check out you, your company, and this done with you program?
Sure, yeah, and actually really quickly on the Google EAT, they're going to start prioritizing firsthand knowledge on Google search, right? So it's going to be even more imperative to share your own expertise, and that what's going to show up first on Google, which is just a nice side note there.
That's
But
mind
best way
blowing.
it is crazy, right?
Yeah,
Um, so best way to reach out to me is honestly it's through my LinkedIn. It's the LinkedIn dash in dash nd Walstra. You can find me as Natasha Walstra. I'm, you know, pretty active on there, so I'm always happy to connect. And as you mentioned, my company is nearpointstrategies.com. I have a podcast as well. It's separate, and that one I'll be sharing more about in the future. But yeah, this was awesome. Thank you.
you're very welcome. And to find out more about the podcast, you need to follow Natasha on LinkedIn and start that conversation with her, because she practices what she preaches, right? Imagine teaching LinkedIn relationship building and saying, oh, you can't find me on LinkedIn. Of course it's on LinkedIn. And so you should follow her and see what she posts, and message her and see if she and her company are a right fit for what you're trying to accomplish. And we all need this, right? Like we said at the beginning, you see the massive following and impact that these influencers have, but a lot of them are either like having fun, or they have a sponsor, and it doesn't really relate to your business. So imagine if we were able to get the benefits of social media without all the downside, which is a lot of that's the distractions and the time suck and the imposter syndrome and comparing yourself to others. Well, how about the upsides of social media, especially because things are always changing. Like I used to really rely on email marketing like 10 years ago, and I got so frustrated when like people wouldn't open the emails, they wouldn't get delivered. There had to be a better way, social media. But then a lot of social media is not about selling. Like try to make sales on Facebook or Twitter or Instagram, it's a lot more difficult. But on LinkedIn, it's a lot more fun playground of business people who are looking to, like as you said, build their team, get their referral sources, kind of connect with someone, some kind of opportunity that makes sense. So you need to be taking LinkedIn seriously. And Natasha Walstra is your person to help with that. She's Natasha Walstra at LinkedIn and nearpointstrategies.com. And so, Natasha, as we wrap up, wind down our conversation, it's fun to put my guests on the spot and ask about a quote or lesson that can help us out today. And it can be about anything. It can be about our conversation or about your life travels. But what comes to mind as far as a fun quote or lesson to wrap this thing up?
Sure. I actually was just reading about it this morning. I wrote it down right here, if that's okay.
Perfect.
Because it was
Yeah,
so
you're
interesting.
prepared.
Because a lot of times we think it's all about content, but um, I read that it's actually Max Trailer, Agency Survival Guide is the name of the book. And he
I know it.
says,
I've had him on the show.
oh, cool, awesome. I'm actually speaking with him later today, which is so funny.
Nice. And
But
I saw him on LinkedIn this morning, like some random post. So
no
like
way.
it all connects.
It all connects.
Yes.
That's of course it does. But he says content doesn't get you conversations. Conversations get you content. And I love that because a lot of times when I'm thinking about what to write about, I just look at my calendar from last week and what did I, looking at my client calls, like what questions do they have? What problem did we solve? And I start thinking about that, right? And I just think it's so powerful when you reframe it that other way because I think we've had it backwards, right? So it was cool.
Right. And now it can be this infinite cycle that you post the content, and that's your activity, and you get the meetings, and the meetings get you more content. And they used to call that vague booking, right? When
Mm,
Facebook was newer, it'd be like if someone disrespected you at the fast food drive-through, if someone cut you off in traffic, you would record a video kind of not naming names. And it's like, well, does that really give any benefit? Well, no. But when you apply it in that business sense, I love that. You look at your calendar, you look at who you're meeting with, you think about the conversations you had, and this way you're not just thinking about things out of thin air, right? You're thinking about the real objections and the real needs and the real problems and the real insights. And even just this conversation, like I have like 5 or 6 ideas for content. I'm sure you too, just from the things that you personally said. And so that's a great insight that you said the conversations lead to the content, not the other way around. And if this information was helpful and mind-blowing for you, then you need to check out nearpointstrategies.com and Natasha Walstra on LinkedIn. Natasha, it's been a very fun, mind-blowing, amazing conversation.
I appreciate you, Robert. Thanks.
All right, super.